We will move right along to the next agenda item. We're a little bit behind, so we're going to adjust things a little bit. We are going to one of our guests who is joining virtually. On the agenda we have Jagmeet Singh, of course, leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada. So we do have 30 minutes, a half hour. We'd like to turn over to Mr. Singh, who is joining us virtually online. So I just want to get some indication that Jagmeet Singh is here, and if we can have Jagmeet Singh unmuted, please. Go ahead. Welcome to the Assembly. I know that was not Jagmeet Singh. Here we go.
An honor to be here at the Assembly. Am I ready to begin the speech?
Yes, proceed, please, Mr. Singh.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd just say incredible honor to be able to share words with you. I wish I could be there with you in person, but I'm in Halifax, in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And I want to start by just taking a moment to give my very, very sincere condolences to the Lake St. Martin First Nation and the family of Linda Mary Beardy. It is horrific that we continue to lose Indigenous women and girls who are missing. And this genocide against Indigenous women has to end. It has to stop now. Enough's enough. It continues to feel like Indigenous lives don't matter. And I know Indigenous people continually let me know that that's how they feel. And seeing this horrific, just horrific finding again of another woman's body in a landfill there has to be an end to this. And so I just wanted to express my condolences. I also want to say a big thank you to so many people, everyone that put on this assembly. Thank you to all the organizers, all the volunteers, and especially I want to acknowledge the National Chief Roseanne Archibald for her leadership. I want to thank the elders for their guidance and wisdom. I want to thank the youth who show us that the bright future is possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. I want to thank veterans for your service, and you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And I want to thank all the chiefs. There's chiefs from across the country here. I want to acknowledge all the chiefs. Thank you so much for everything you do in your communities. Merci, c'est vraiment un honneur d'être.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here among you. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few words.
I really acknowledge how it's an honor for me to be here, given that this is your special Chiefs Assembly on the draft United Nations Declaration National Action Plan. And we needed an action plan for so long, and this is encouraging that we're seeing some steps here. I want to acknowledge, though, to get to this point, so many Indigenous leaders, so many chiefs, so many activists, so many people have brought us to this moment. I want to acknowledge Romeo Saganash, who at the federal level was one of the champions pushing for this on the political side in the House of Commons. I want to thank Leah Gazan, who continues to push hard and have fought hard. Everyone has fought really hard to have the government harmonize the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People with Canadian law. And not really that harmonizing is what's been missing for so long. All of your leadership is very inspiring to our entire team. We know the action plan is extremely important, and that's why it's not my place or the New Democratic Party's place to provide commentary on the draft action plan. We're here to listen to what you think needs to be done. If this is enough, I'm here to listen to what First Nations have to say, what needs to be included, what needs to be expanded, or how it needs to be changed. I want to hear from you. And I want you to know that I'm your ally. I want you to consider me an ally, to be shoulder to shoulder with you, to fight alongside you for whatever is needed. One thing is certain, though, First Nations shouldn't have to keep on going to court to fight for their rights. It is imperative that the federal government get the action plan right, get it right. Liberals have taken years to get to this point, and we can't wait any longer to deliver on basic human rights. As I stand here, we know there is direct violations of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as we speak. And it makes me really sad in a country as wealthy as ours, a country that's has the history that our country has, that it continues to be the case that Indigenous people are just fighting for their basic rights. I'm trying to use my sadness, my disappointment as motivation to fight for what's right. Fight to ensure that projects are not approved without the free, prior, and informed consent of affected First Nations communities. And that it's your nations that see the benefits from the investments, not the CEOs who already have billions of dollars. We want to see Indigenous nations get the benefits of those developments. Right now, my friend Sol Mamakwa and Chief Munias are fighting for the rights of Niskandiga to be respected as Doug Ford is trying to fast track a project. Justin Trudeau has talked a lot about the exploitation of critical minerals for jobs creation, and many of those projects will be in your nations. I want to make sure that in any of these projects, we're going to be watching very carefully. I'm going to make sure that your rights under the United Nations Declaration are being respected and upheld. Your rights must be respected, not only when it fits economic interests, but every time these decisions are being made. Leader Kazan is also fighting for free, prior, and informed consent to be upheld in the childcare legislation. We need this really, truly to be harmonized with all legislation. We need to explicitly affirm that free, prior, informed consent concerning children is in the legislation. This is going to be an important test to see if the Liberals are really committed to the UN Declaration. I'm not going to stop fighting until your rights as parents are upheld. I was reading a story recently, including a comment from National Chief Archibald, in which she was saying, quote, the federal government turns around and deliberately underfunds us and keeps us in these cycles of poverty rather than moving us towards prosperity. This quote hit me hard because it's true. My team have had multiple conversations about funding for basic human rights, such as living in a suitable and safe home without mold or overcrowding, drinking safe water, going to school in a safe environment, or simply ensuring the safety of First Nations women. And often my team is being told when we ask for certain things, when we say Indigenous communities need this, we're being told we're asking for too much. And they say they don't have money for it. It's too much, they don't have money for it. I think that is wrong. Last year in the budget, we have to have enough money to make sure that Indigenous people get respect and dignity. That answer, there's just not enough money, is not good enough. It's not going to cut it. Last year in budget 2022, we fought to get more funding for distinction-based Indigenous housing. And we asked for much more, but we got the government to dedicate at least $4 billion. Without your advocacy, without our advocacy, without fighting for this, the government would never have done it. I'm really honored that we were able to move them forward, but we know it's not enough. $4 billion is really far from what's needed. It's seriously too little given all the underfunding. The same thing with urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing. We fought hard because we want to make sure that is also a priority. We fought and got $4 billion commitment. Again, if it was up to the Liberals on their own, they wouldn't have done it, and Conservatives obviously would have cut instead of investing. It's the same thing that we were hearing when we asked for funding for implementing the calls to justice of the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. There are some important steps that we fought for in the 2023 budget, and that includes the work that Leah Kazan has done to lift up the voices of those who are pushing hard for the immediate implementation of a red dress alert. We're going to make sure that these things happen swiftly. We're going to keep on pushing them to move faster. We're going to make sure that this is not treated as a side problem. This is a matter of life and death. This is urgent, and it has to be treated with that urgency. I want you to know I stand in solidarity with you. And I can assure you that for me, that Indigenous people's rights and justice are a priority, and it's also a priority for my entire team. I'll always remember the trips that I made out to Indigenous communities, meeting with leadership, meeting with communities, meeting with people, meeting with children, going to Niskandiga, going to Grassy Narrows, going to communities across this country, meeting with people, and seeing the incredible potential, and seeing and hearing from people that have the solutions and just need a real partner in Ottawa that's going to work with you. I want you to know that I keep those stories and I keep those memories with me. No matter the issue that we are facing, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about all the challenges is imagine if any of these challenges were happening in a city like Halifax, where I am today, or in Toronto or in Ottawa. Any of the challenges that Indigenous communities face, if it was happening in a major city, it would have been fixed years ago. There would have been no delay. They would have said there's not enough money. It would have been done. If it was a big bank or a powerful corporation asking for help, there would have been no waiting. It would have been done right away. I believe that it is simply a matter of will, not a matter of capacity or ability. It is clear when the government wants to do something, it moves quickly, and when they don't, they drag their feet. I want to build a country where we take care of each other, because I believe we are stronger and we are better off when we do so. A Canada where we all rise together. And I can tell you without a doubt, I will never stop fighting for justice for Indigenous people. That is a basic human right. The inherent rights and the treaty rights are basic rights that need to be respected. I want to thank you again for this opportunity, and I hope you have a productive assembly and have great meetings and discussions. Again, it's a huge honor to be here. Merci, miigwech.
Miigwech. Thank you very much, Jagmeet Singh, for joining us here today. So I'm going to open up the assembly. If there's anybody here in the room or joining virtually, if you have any comments or questions for Mr. Singh, hopefully we'll take a few minutes and allow for that opportunity. Microphone number 2, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Singh. Good day. It's Chief Achnipanishkam, Martin Falls First Nation. As you know, Martin Falls is one of the communities in support of economic development, particularly in the Ring of Fire. I want to know what the NDP is doing to support economic development with First Nation communities, instead of just siding with the Liberal government as you have done, and perpetuate that poverty that we still have today, especially with the housing shortage. You go along and sit beside the Liberal government today and approve the housing plan. That is a huge shortage still in Canada today. So, Minister Singh, I'd like for you to address that. How could you sit with the Liberal government and approve the housing budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Should I take the question or should I take a couple?
Go ahead, Jagmeet Singh, go ahead.
Okay. So we absolutely believe in economic development. We need to make sure Indigenous communities have the rights on those lands. And any economic development that happens, any sort of project that gets built, has to have a guarantee that there's money, that there's jobs, that there's opportunities that flow to the people of the land. This has for a long time been a major problem. We absolutely reject the previous approach where projects are built on Indigenous land and none of the benefit, none of the wealth, none of the prosperity goes to Indigenous people. That cannot continue. That is wrong. And so that's why we're fighting to force this government to make sure anytime there's a project, first of all, the project has to only move forward working with Indigenous communities, respecting the declaration first. And then if the project moves forward respecting Indigenous communities, it can only move forward if it benefits those communities. We want to see economic sovereignty, not just sovereignty in terms of laws and ability to make decisions, but nations need to have the economic sovereignty to be able to take care of the people there. And ultimately, to build that prosperity, any development that goes on Indigenous land has to create opportunities of wealth and prosperity for Indigenous people. So I believe in that absolutely. In terms of the government, I want to be really, really clear. I have a hard time working with the Liberals. These are folks that do not deliver what people need and have shown again and again that they drag their feet and they don't do what's necessary. Because they don't do what's needed for people, we force them to write it down on paper in our agreement. We made them write it down because we didn't trust them to do it unless it was written down. So I want you to know right now, any money that is in the budget for housing is because we forced the government to do so. They would not have done it without us. If we were not there, it would have been $0. We forced them to deliver. The other opposition parties are happy just to make noise on the sidelines, but they're not getting anything done. It's hard to work with people that I don't agree with all the time. It's difficult, it's challenging, it's frustrating. It makes me angry when I know that the Prime Minister has the power to fix the problems that Indigenous people are going through. But I would consider it a waste of my time in Parliament if I just sat there and made noise on the sidelines without using my power to make them do something. So we forced the government to deliver. The other opposition leaders have not done that. Conservatives make a lot of noise, but they've not made a difference for people. The Bloc makes some noise, they haven't made a difference. We can tell you very clearly that if there's help in this budget, if there is any respect and dignity in this budget, it's because we fought the Liberals. We clawed tooth and nail to get even that much in there. If we were not there, it would not have happened. So we forced them to do it. A lot more needs to happen. That's only going to happen with a new Democrat government, to be frank with you. Conservatives are going to cut. The Liberals are going to just do the status quo. If you really want the help, it's going to require new Democrats being in power. And that's my goal. I want to be your Prime Minister so I can truly deliver on these commitments.
Thank you, Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP. So we have two more in the room. Okay, we have more than two. So I'm going to take three and then a response. And if we have more, I'll come back. So microphone number 2, please.
Thank you, Jagmeet, for your words and support for our causes. In 2017, Canada announced the National Housing Strategy. Disabled, people that were racialized, Indigenous, were all to be prioritized. Women were to be prioritized in the strategy. So in 2018, Canada and AFN undertook a housing needs assessment across Canada. 400 First Nations responded. That initiative, and it cost $1 million, by the way, that initiative was supposed to guide the government in future investments in housing. The needs assessment that was compiled as a result of that 2018 study indicated that some $60 billion was needed to deal with housing and housing-related infrastructure across the country. Ontario needed $4.4 billion. So in budget 2022, Canada allocated, I think it was $2 billion to address housing, and then there was $2 billion in the child welfare case settlement. AFN has updated the needs based on the cost of building today, and it's estimated that there's $135.1 billion needed for housing across Canada now. Ontario needs $4.41 billion now and during the next 5 years. So the investment isn't going to come anywhere close to the need that's been identified. It's becoming more and more critical. Elders in our community, if their roof needs to repaired, they don't have $10,000 to pay a roofer, and they don't have sufficient income on their pension to take out a loan. Or if the septic system needs to be replaced, they don't have $25,000 to replace that. The RAP budget for Ontario, operated by CMHC for Ontario, is $1.6 million for the whole province, and about 40% of that for the Southern First Nations. So by the time it gets down to the community level, there's not that much there to address a huge need. And so as the situation with housing is becoming more and more critical, if the housing issues are not resolved by the government, more and more children from poor families will go into care because they don't have shelter. The costs of rents are rising in this country. Native people don't have incomes to keep up with the rising cost of rent, and as a result, a lot of them are facing more increased homelessness. So it's a national crisis, and the people that are most severely affected are the poor ones, and nearly all of a significant portion of our people are in poverty. In Ontario, there's 89,000 cases of Ontario Works social services payments, which affect 119,000 children.
Thank you, Chief.
So it requires some urgent attention on the government.
Miigwech, Chief Miracle. So I'll go to 3 speakers, and then we'll go to a response and then come back. Microphone 2 again.
Judy Wilson, proxy holder for Chief Clarence Louis, Sundinbad. I just wanted to say, first, it's very appalling what the First Minister meetings that they didn't even include our national chief or executive to those meetings. How can we relay our concerns and interests and our priorities when we're not sitting at the table? I recall in the climate crisis First Minister's meeting in Vancouver, we were invited to the table. We need to continually be at those First Minister tables so we can relay our issues, relay our concerns. You heard about the housing, the health, the water, climate crisis, but also, you know, with this UN Declaration Act action plan, you know, we need to be at those tables to ensure, because there's such a large gap between the division of powers with the federal and the province, and it's continually impeding all the work that we do in regards to, you know, when we're in our home territories. So that's the first one, and I think it's really important. I don't want to hear anymore that, you know, our national or main organization with the chiefs are not at the table, these respective tables. I think it's going to be, how can that be any kind of work in regards to upholding the articles in the UN Declaration? The other point I think it's important that it's going to be is co-development. When we're talking about our health legislation, we didn't even trust putting co-development in the resolution because we don't trust the federal co-development process. So I think that's important to address when we're looking at these policies, these legislations, the action plans. We have to be at those tables. I just wanted to limit it to 2 anyway. I probably could say more.
Great. Thank you very much, Miigwech. And I think everyone's aware the order that we follow. We go in a circle, so nobody online, microphone number 1, and then I'll go to Jagmeet Singh for a response. Microphone 1, please.
Chief Marcel Head, Shoal Lake Cree Nation. About a half an hour ago, we met with the Minister of ISC, and I brought the subject of housing in our community. What I said and shared with the minister is that the amount of money that was funded, you know, by ISC through the immediate needs funding, it doesn't really address, I guess, the backlog that we have in our communities, not just for Shoal Lake but across the country. We have a list that's, I don't know if it's just overwhelming, and I don't see, you know, the amount of money that's coming in. It's not going to ever catch up with the backlog. So, you know, in terms of advocacy, I guess in your part, Mr. Singh, is, you know, that the federal government needs to take an immediate action, you know, to address the housing needs in our community. Right now, you know, our housing is deplorable. I have 5 houses, you know, that are under extermination because of insect problems. And that's 5 families that are without houses at this time. And we're putting them up in the hotels. And as soon as there's a house become available, they have to live in those houses. But to make things worse, you know, we have people that are living off reserve. And the province is just simply, you know, not really doing a great deal, you know, to address the housing problems. But the rental, you know, I guess back in Saskatchewan, they allow the social services to directly pay the rental part on the names of those individuals. They're responsible to pay for the rent, not the province. So the problem that we have is that almost on a weekly basis we get requests for rental payments of those rental units off reserve, and we're using our own funding, you know, to pay for those rent. So. Seconds. If something, you know, if you have it, you know, in your ability, I guess, to discuss this with the current government, it'll be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Miigwech, Chief. Jagmeet Singh, I'll turn it over to you for a response on those 3.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the three, so first off, the first question was from Chief Miracle about the national housing strategy. I agree with you. A lot of the questions were touching on housing. I agree with you that the housing strategy sounded good, but then it didn't actually, what was put forward as a great strategy didn't actually pan out in action, and that's a serious problem. I want to agree with everybody who said that there's just not enough money for housing. The needs are so high, and what's being announced is far too low. I agree. This government is failing to deal with the urgency of the housing crisis. It's true. One silver lining or one positive news I want to share with you is that we're going to keep on pushing. We're going to keep on fighting. One specific thing that we fought for is to really help and assist by developing a new fund that is for Indigenous, by Indigenous people. This is an important way to make sure that we deliver funds in a way that actually meets the needs of Indigenous communities. Often I hear that there's a great announcement, there's funding, but no one can ever access it. So we want to change the way that was done. So that's something we fought for, to change the way and to change the approach around how funding is delivered. So that's one, I would say, positive thing we fought for. But yes, the needs are not going to keep up. The rent's going up. The disproportionate impact on Indigenous people. It means Indigenous people are the ones that are feeling the housing crisis more. You're absolutely right. I'm going to fight and keep on fighting with this government to deliver more until I become the Prime Minister, and then I deliver what's needed. But in the meantime, we're going to keep on pushing and fighting to get more funding, a better response, take this seriously. Katie, who is serving as proxy, wants to relate two things. One, having a seat at the table in the First Minister's meeting. I agree. It is wrong that Indigenous people and First Nations are not having a seat at the table in the First Minister's meet. That's something the federal government could make happen. And in this case, the Liberal government did not do that, and they were wrong to do that. I agree with you. First Nations should be at all the tables, whether it's on housing or the climate crisis and the First Minister's meeting. So I agree, and I'll raise this concern. And the second one is people don't even trust this idea of co-development. They don't trust the process. So on the United Nations Declaration, that's also where Indigenous people need to be at the table for the action plan. I agree. And so that's something I'll raise. Chief Marceau mentioned again the housing issue, and that it's just simply not going to catch up with the needs in Shoal Lake, but across the country, the issue is the same. There's just not enough being committed to deal with the problems that are on reserve. You mentioned the 5 houses that are dealing with insect problems, and those families don't have a place. I hear you loud and clear. We're going to keep on fighting to make sure that there is better responsive housing. It is the #1 issue for Indigenous communities. It's the #1 issue for communities across the country. So I'm going to keep on fighting back and saying there's more is needed, and I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Jagmeet Singh. So at this point, I have 4 speakers in the room and 1 virtually, so I'm going to have to close the speakers list. I'm not sure that we can get to everyone, but we'll do our best. Microphone 2, please.
Thank you. Ted Cusance, proxy for the Keyscoos First Nation from Saskatchewan, Treaty 4. Mr. Singh, this is probably the second time I'm asking you this question. Last Assembly, I asked you the same question. Haven't got a response. In regards to the doctrine of discovery that was announced about a week ago, as you know, before the Pope left the country, he declared that what happened to us as survivors was outright genocide. Then the House of Commons met and they had a vote. They also agreed that it was outright genocide. And in my community, we found a lot of unidentified graves for children. Right across the country, it's happening. The question I have for you is, what is your next steps in regards to dealing with the whole issue of genocide? And also, another thing I want to say, you're part of the government, and I kind of find you very hypocritical at times. If you want to be Prime Minister, just call an election. You're in a driver's seat. I'm pretty sure Trudeau could handle this election. Maybe Paul Yet will be our next Prime Minister. It's your call. If you want to be the next Prime Minister, it's in your hands. Take care and God bless.
Miigwech, thank you. I'm going to turn to Zoom Chief Andrea Paul. Now, if we can have Chief Paul unmuted, please. Go ahead, Chief Paul.
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to go off my video there. So really happy to see you here. I'm always very excited to hear you speak. You're always very empowering for me. But I guess the thing that I wanted to bring up is there is a situation happening right now in Vancouver and at the Vancouver east side, or people are being removed, and I don't know what kind of communication. I'm on the other end, but I just got a message about this, and so a lot of these people are Indigenous people, and I don't know if there was conversations happening with First Nations. I don't know what kind of conversation was happening at the government level. Here we are talking about treating people with dignity, with respect, and that they are humans. And I guess, I don't know if it's a question for you or if it's just a question with regards to, is there programs set up for these people that are being moved from the streets? It's very alarming to see this happening right now. And I know when I was in Vancouver there last summer, I ended up at that street, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking. And I just wanted to bring that forward as it just came to my attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Paul. I'll turn on to microphone number 1.
Thank you. Chief Ross Montour, Kahnawake Mohawk Nation. I'm here as a proxy for Grand Chief Kasanahui Sky Deer. It's good to speak with you, Minister Jagmeet Singh. I want to bring to your attention, first, before I get to what my points are, I just had a conversation. The issue of housing has come up a number of times this week. Even in a large, apparently well-off Indigenous nation or territory as Kahnawake is, we have a housing crisis as well. There's over 100 people from our community who cannot live in the community. They have to find places at great expense outside of our community. So this is a serious issue, and it's only going to grow. And one of the things that I make a connection to, and I just spoke to Judy Wilson about this too a moment ago, is that the issue, say in the action plan, there's no mention made of restoration of land. I made a point earlier today that Indigenous people have possession of 0.2% of the landmass in Canada. The government of Canada over 100 years ago gave over rights to natural resources and so on to the provinces, not taking into account that they had signed treaties with Indigenous nations, which was about sharing the land, plow deep, and so derive no benefit. And so in their lives get to administer poverty. So that's something that I would present to you as an imperative that you need to bring forward in government. I didn't say ask. I said I charge you with the need to do that. You hold the balance of power to address those are weaknesses in the action plan. Those are weaknesses in the law that was passed. Okay. Also in there.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'm sorry. The action plan has to include a review of the conformity of the common law, and more specifically the common law's interpretation of Section 35 with UNDRIP, and identify federal, legislative and policy measures required to address the areas of nonconformity. Okay. In the what we heard report, they noted the necessity of repudiation of the doctrine of discovery within the context of the section on lands and resources, but no link was made to the common law's reliance on the doctrine or any measures identified to ensure the repudiation in law, sir, not in the preamble, in law.
Thank you, Chief.
That's
If you
critical.
can, wrap it up, please. Miigwech.
Thank you. I just got to get a commitment that you will press that in Parliament. That needs to happen because they keep saying, oh, there is no political will. We'll talk about it.
Thank you, Chief. Miigwech. Jagmeet Singh, if you can respond. I know I'd closed the speakers list already, but if you can please respond, and we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see on our.
Yeah. First question was Proxy Couscous mentioned doctrine of discovery. I think it's very obvious that doctrine of discovery is based on a very racist idea that people living on the land that were there already are not treated as humans, not treated as having any rights to the lands. That's clearly wrong, and it never have happened. The people that were there should be respected, and that is an ongoing injustice that Indigenous people continue to suffer. Pretty clearly unfair and unjust that somehow the people that were not there because they didn't happen to be from the country of the colonizers or of the same religion of the colonizers somehow had less rights. That's wrong. It's clearly wrong. And it's clear that what has happened to Indigenous people very overtly is genocide. Clear steps are taken to deny all the conditions, whether it was to strip Indigenous people of the ability to live and prosper, to remove their children from their communities, strip them of their language and identity. All those are clear indicia or clear steps that are genocidal in nature, very clearly. That's why Leah Gazan pushed forward, one of our MPs pushed forward the vote, and it was voted on that yes, what happened in residential schools was just no question about it. The next steps, and that's a very important and heavy question. What are the next steps? Recognizing is just one step. Then how do we move towards justice? Some of the concrete things, there's calls to action. There's a Truth and Reconciliation's calls to actions. There's calls to justice from the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Those are starting points. Those are concrete steps that can be taken. But I would look to Indigenous leadership for what should be the next steps beyond that. But those are some concrete basic things, making sure every community has housing and clean drinking water and rights for their children, rights to education, like basic rights should be respected. That would seem to be at a minimum what needs to happen. But beyond that, there's a lot more, and I'm open to hearing from Indigenous leadership and community members on what that should be. On Andrea Paul, what's going on right now in Vancouver, the downtown east side, I was just reading up on it. There are massive police presence removing people out of community, and there is no plan in place right now. This was something that was done without any notice. I think they did that on purpose so that people could prepare for it, and people were not aware of it. We did not know this was going to happen. This was a decision taken in Vancouver by, I would assume, the Vancouver mayor and working with police there, but there doesn't seem to be any plan in place for the people that are being relocated and moved out. And there's a lot of people that were living on the downtown east side in community, and many of them are Indigenous. There seems to be no plan at all. I just learned of this before getting on the call here, so I'm still going to speak with my team and see if there's anything that can be done. But it seems like this was done last minute, or maybe they planned it, but we did not hear about it. They purposely probably kept it quiet. But yes, this is very disturbing, really concerning. And you mentioned dignity and respect. Those are the two things that I think are lacking in the response so far. So very, very concerned. Oh, I should also mention, Proxy Couscous said that I could just call an election. Yeah, I could call an election. Absolutely. I could just call one. I could say there needs to be an election. People sent me to Parliament to work, not to just make noise like the Conservatives like to make noise on the corner. What have they done? What is a single thing that they've done for Indigenous people, for non-Indigenous people? What have they done? Nothing. In two minority governments, they've done nothing. In 2019, we had a minority government. in 2021, we had a minority government. They have literally done nothing. They're the official opposition of this country and can't say they did a single thing for Indigenous people. I think that is horrible. To go to Parliament, to get elected, to get duly elected, do nothing for people. So I took the responsibility that we've been chosen by Canadians to have a minority government. I would have rather they chose me as Prime Minister, but I respect that's people's choice. I still want to be Prime Minister. That's my goal. Absolutely. Why would I be a leader of a party and not try to become Prime Minister? I believe I could do a better job than both Poilievre and Trudeau. I would actually put people first and not the big corporations, which both of them seem like they're. I believe in fighting for people. I've been through the struggles. I understand what it's like to be like you don't belong. My family has gone through economic hardship. When my dad was struggling with addiction, I had to take care of my kid brother, and it was me and him on my own. I was working 3 jobs to care for him. I don't think Poilievre or Trudeau have ever lived that type of life. I have a little understanding of what those struggles are like. I can't say I experienced the worst struggles, but I've experienced some of them. I know what it's like to be worried about going hungry and have to work multiple jobs to take care of my kid brother. I know what that's like, and that's what drives me. And so instead of calling an election, I'm forcing this government to deliver. And I wish we could get more out of them. It would make my heart happier if we could get more out of them. But we're getting as much as we can, and we're not going to give up. We're going to keep on fighting. So my role is to force this government to deliver. And I hear your feedback, and I'm going to continue to try to make them deliver until we can get to an election. And when we get there, then we'll fight an election. But I don't want to just call an election for the sake of it. When Canadians chose a minority government, a year and a half since the last election, I don't think it's responsible to just call an election arbitrarily. I think it has to happen when we've exhausted every effort to make Parliament work for people, and then we can look at that. But that's not something we're at right now. Chief Andrew Paul, I had mentioned. Then Mohawk Nation, the proxy to the chief, mentioned housing and restoration of land. This has been a big concern that Indigenous people do not have the rights over their own lands. They don't see the economic benefits of what's happening on their lands. I agree this is a major concern. And the question of restoration of land or having the power over one's land, these are very important questions. I will bring them up. And you mentioned that nonconformity in relation to Section 35 and the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery. I will bring this up. You've asked me to bring it up. I will bring it up in our meetings with the Prime Minister and with the government.
Thank you very much, Jagmeet Singh. If you can bear with us, I did close the speakers list. Since then, I've had hands go up online and more approach the microphones, but I'm going to stick with the 2 that we had already had at the microphones before we closed speakers list, and then we'll start to wrap up. Bear with us, Chiefs. I know you have told us you would like to deal with the resolutions. You'd like to deal with the resolutions, and we'd like to get there as soon as we can. So with that, microphone number 1.
Chief Wilfred King, Kiasoging, Nishnabek, Gulbay First Nation. The question I have for you, Jagmeet, is that right now you hold a balance of power in Parliament. And in fact, it's been said that you have propped up the Liberals to stay in power. The question I have for you, and I want to thank you for the dental bill that was, the dental money that came across, and again, was your effort that did that. But right now, a lot of our First Nations are dealing with land claims that have been backlogged and stalled. And I want to talk a bit about the Lac Seul decision, also known as Southwind, which has already been adjudicated by the Supreme Court of Canada, that talked about claims and equity. And we're in a very similar situation. I'm not speaking just for Gull Bay here, but I'm speaking for every community across Canada that's in a similar situation as Gull Bay based on fact and law. And that these claims are based on equity, but yet there's been no movement on that, even though the Supreme Court has ruled. So I would like to see your party or your caucus, and I'm not sure who you're working with, whether or not you get advice from the Assembly of First Nations or you get advice from different provincial organizations, or who's advising the NDP in relation to pushing these items forward to the government right now, to the Liberal government, and whether or not that's being done and whether or not those issues are being addressed at your caucus. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Singh. My name is George Lampro, Chief for Simp First Nation. I've got a question on how you can help us deal with a serious situation that the federal government has put us in again. as title holding First Nations in BC, we have to deal with the Métis now, which your government has committed to include in the consultative data list in BC. They take a lot of funding from us as proper rights and title holders, and it's a huge concern, especially when the Métis moved in after the settlers, after the province of BC. We have had to fight in the courts for our rights as title holders in BC to get that right to be a title holder in BC, only to have a group that does not have any rights show up in our province, which was 100% owned by First Nations, get those same rights just by making a claim that they have rights and that that the federal government has granted them rights. I want to know how you're going to help us deal with the situation the federal government has put us in when it comes to federal government affording rights to the Métis in BC, where they clearly had no rights previous to contact. The rights and title holders of BC are getting shortchanged. The funding that the Métis are getting is taking away funding from us as rights and title holders in our territory. Rights our people had to fight for. It would be nice if we could just show up and say we have these rights and demand and get everything they've been asking for. It's still a fight for our communities to have equitable funding for education, for health, all of those areas, yet when it comes to the Métis, you're giving out millions of dollars to a group that does not have a land base in BC. So how are you going to help us deal with this issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is one more. If we can make it brief, please. Microphone number 1.
Yeah, very brief. My name is Chief Kelvin Bruno from Papashays First Nation, based out of Edmonton, Alberta. We're a landless band, and our land was taken away illegally by the federal government years ago. And my question to Jagmeet Singh is, will you, Minister, if you contact your office, will you help us to help get official recognition from the federal government and reserve lands for our band? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jagmeet Singh.
Okay, thank you. Chief Wilfred Galbay acknowledged the dental care that we fought for. We also fought in that agreement to actually improve the NHIB, which has received a lot of concerns about not getting claims rejected, not getting claims processed enough, too complicated. So we fought for improvements for that. So those are going to roll out over the next year. We're hoping that that'll be improved. But thank you for that. So land claim backlog was the issue, and the lax sole decision and claims inequity. We absolutely acknowledge that we've been approached by many different communities who've got land claims, and they've been so delayed, the backlog. If my office can help you with accelerating or pushing forward, please reach out. You can contact my office directly. Probably the easiest way is Jagmeet Singh at ndp.ca or Jagmeet at ndp.ca. So my first name at ndp.ca. Reach out, and if we can help, we'll try to provide any assistance we can. But that backlog is a major problem, and I've heard many communities raise concerns about that. Chief, about the title holding nations, the Métis BC, this is not an issue that I'm familiar with, and so I can't speak specifically to the issue. I don't know the details around that, but I can tell you that often the federal government wants to play a game of dividing people against each other instead of making sure there's enough abundance in Canada to make sure all Indigenous people are receiving the respect and dignity they deserve. And that's what I'm going to fight for. I don't know enough about the specific issue to give you a thoughtful answer. I don't want to just come up with something on the spot, but I don't know enough about the specific issue. But title holders should be receiving sufficient funding and resources to take care of the community and to get what's rightfully theirs. And that's what I'm going to fight for. Chief Bruno mentioned the landless ban and that you're fighting for recognition. Again, please reach out to my office. We'll try our best to help. We've had a couple of cases like this come to our office, and we've always tried to provide assistance. If I can help in any way, I'd be honored to do so. I want to wrap up by one last thing. I am absolutely, obviously, an elected official, leader of a party, and it's a distinction that's sometimes hard to make. But the Liberals government. We're not in government with them. We are in opposition, but we have an agreement, and we use that to force them to do more. And we are always willing to fight to force them to do more. But when we are in government, then we are going to make major changes. But we need to be in government to make that happen. Thank you so much, Miigwech.
Mr. Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP. On behalf of the Assembly, we'd like to say thank you. National Chief Archibald has a nice gift here for you. It's a moose antler carving and a pair of moccasins, I believe. So we'll have to figure out a way of sending it to you virtually. We're not there yet. We'll send it in the mail. Thank you very much, Miigwech.
Much appreciate it.